The best B2B sales teams are able to close 30% or more of their deals, but HubSpot says the average win rate is 21%. If marketing is generating leads, but your sales team is having trouble closing them, it might not be for effort. It might be because you're selling to the wrong ICP. My name is Melissa Rogozinski with the Marketing Phoenix podcast, and I'm very excited to sit here with my good friend and colleague, CJ Webster, to talk about the cost of selling to the wrong ICP. CJ, talk to our audience.
Thank you, Rogo, for bringing me on to your podcast. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think it's very meaningful and really looking forward to your questions so that we can jump in and have some fun.
Excellent. So let's set the stage first, CJ. Let's talk about how to create and evolve ICPs. I think, we've talked about one of the biggest issues we see is that often companies aren't defining their ICPs correctly, or maybe they need to evolve them after a little bit of time with marketing and sales and kind of, seeing some potential issues. So a lot of teams I know, they don't really understand that there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 types of ICPs. You've got the gatekeeper who controls the flow of information. Then you've got the influencer who tries to influence the outcome with their opinions. Then you have the initiator who makes the suggestion for purchasing a product or service. The decider who obviously has the final decision, the buyer who's responsible for the contract, and then finally the end user who's actually using the item being purchased. And often I see sales teams going to the end user, and the end user may not have anything at all to do or have any influence, doesn't sign the contract, isn't buying, isn't paying. And so they're, in situations like that, they're starting with the wrong ICP. So what are some of the things that you see that teams are maybe selling to the wrong ideal client persona?
It's an interesting question and also very intriguing setting the table when you laid out, the gatekeeper, influencer, initiator, decider, buyer, end user. I think it really depends on what type of solution is being pushed in the market. If it's a large enterprise solution, I think it definitely fits a lot of those different ICPs and those different personas.
You'll have
There's
multiple
different,
stakeholders in a situation like that if it's enterprise, not just one.
correct. But also you may have to have a different type of strategy. So I think about one particular sales professional that I know very well in selling enterprise solutions. And this particular tech sales professional, he worked at some of those large companies like Oracle and whatnot. So you're like long sales process. You're talking about, you're lucky if it's 6 months, right? But when I talked to him about sales and his process that he used and what made him so successful, he actually would vet all the different ICPs that you're talking about, and he would create these magical, wonderful narratives, painting a picture of how they would use the solution. And he would learn from those conversations, and he would apply it to the other discussions that he was having, whether it would be with the decider or be with the buyer. He was showing them that he had buy-in at all levels, so that this should be a no-brainer, because he was able to articulate very concisely what's in it for them, how they would use it, and what they would benefit from it. That's different than what we kind of were, leading to and initially with the question. So I didn't answer the question, but I just wanted to throw that in because I thought it was an interesting approach where I haven't seen that before, but as he described it to me, it kind of made sense. And he says that it was the narrative. That's what sells it. It's understanding their needs, of course, understanding where they are at, but being able to provide it in a very simple way, in a story-like fashion, so that they can remember and they can actually see and visualize how that solution will work with his enterprise sales process. Now, of course, you didn't bring me on to talk about that, but I just wanted to bring that there because I thought it was interesting when you laid out those different ICPs. So your question regarding, the different ICPs and things of that nature, and also just even getting around to the description or the definition of a ICP, an ideal, customer profile, um, I would say is that it's different ways that you can approach it. Coming from a GM background and also a big sales background. I mean, obviously, you look at uh, firmographics, you look at pain points, needs, you look at budget and buying power, you look at, like you said, decision makers, you look at behaviors and triggers. There's so many different data points that you need to look at. And then at some point, you just need to just try it and push it out there and then have a clear channel to speak to your clients, to speak to the people that even did not buy the solution and ask them those hard questions. Because somewhere between that execution and that exercise, it will lead you to what your ICP should be. And I remember years ago talking to one of our colleagues that's in the legal tech profession.
Mhm.
We were taking a product to market, and she said to me, she says, "We're just take it to the market and start asking questions with your clients, with your target. Ask them questions such as, what benefit do they receive from this? What value do they see from this? What decisions led them to buy from you? What decisions led them to go with a different solution provider?" You have to be able to stomach those type of questions, because you may find out that you thought your product was for one particular thing, but the market sees the fit and the value as something else. That's very important as you try to hone in and narrow into your ICP.
So I'm hearing two things from that. The first thing I'm hearing is the research component, not even the consultative. Like, you can't consult until you've done the research. And I think, that's, what are some of the most common signs you're selling to the wrong ICP? I think one of the first things that a lot of sales reps do wrong, and they're probably usually a little bit more junior, they're not stopping to do the research. They have to take a step back and realize this isn't about my product or my service. This is about solving a problem for the prospect that I'm pursuing. So
Right.
do your research so you understand who they are, which one of the six you know categories they fall into is the ICP, and especially if it's a larger sell, then they're probably part of a larger group of stakeholders, anywhere from 3 to 6 stakeholders.
Right.
So do your research first, and then understand how this is going to impact each one of them, and then from that you can start kind of framing the story, right, that you're talking about.
Right.
Doing the research, being able to frame the story, then you can start with the sales meetings, and you can have more consultative sales meetings. And as you're meeting with the different stakeholders, you're right. You're able to tie that story together so they all understand, because they know how they work together as a team. And you're coming from the outside looking in. You're not part of that team. But if you've done your research and you can tell a story and you go into these sales meetings with a consultative approach, and you can help them see that you understand who the players are, who the characters of the story are, and what their roles are, that perpetuates the message, and it builds trust and confidence in you. And when you're bringing, it's kind of like selling, we're both in legal tech. So we're talking about selling legal technology to law firms, and going to the managing partner, he might be someone who makes the decision, and maybe it's procurement that actually signs the contract, but it's the paralegal who's the end user. And then what about their IT person? Do they have, an IT full-time in-house? Do they have, are they outsourcing that to a consultant IT? Because I just had this conversation with a managing partner of a law firm a couple of weeks ago. There's 4 stakeholders right there. You've got the paralegal who's the end user. You've got the managing partner who's the decider. You've got the controller or procurement who signs the contract and is going to pay the bills. And then you've got the IT who, this person is, he falls within that too, right? Because the IT person has to be involved in implementing this technology. So you've got, how many was that? 4? Did I count 4 by ICPs in a technology purchase? And, then the other thing is, bringing in client success to that equation, because once you've sold it, how is client success helping you to, maintain that?
Yeah, I'm
And
with you on that. I think that, it starts with, for me, I take it this way, just looking at, you're talking about, common signs of selling into a, you know, you're selling to the wrong ICP. I mean, I look at it as, I see it as a bigger I look at it from a bigger lens of first and foremost, like you said, we agree on the research. And that's really on understanding what is the problem that I'm trying to solve
Mhm.
and who has this problem.
And the problem isn't I need to meet my numbers. I need to
Correct.
meet
Yeah,
my
you're
goals.
absolutely right.
That's
It's
the
not.
problem.
So we're up. I'm so far. I'm up higher in the chain in the supply chain at this point. As we trickle down to it till we get the sales, I'll get there. But it's what's the pain? What's the value of the solution? What will they pay for? What does this do? Does it save them time? Does it help them make money? Right? Does this provide some type of relief in another area that is a pain for the the customer or the client to do, right? And so then I think about also being really tight with your product dev people, understanding what the product was built for, right? So it's the research, it's the product partnership, it's the marketing partnership, right? Which that, right? Because
Mhm.
marketing can do a ton of research and they can validate a ton of possibilities on different paths to make sure that it goes to the correct ICP. Having a general manager to understand the strategy and the vision and bring it all together to distill that down for sales with the value prop, with the personas, having a pathway for client management and customer success, having tools and solutions that go back to surveys and speaking back to the clients, having a look back type process with win loss work, right? Win loss surveys, having sometimes phone calls instead of doing a survey when you lose an account. Why did we lose this account? What are we hearing? Having solutions like best in breed solutions, like a lot of folks use Gong these days, so that marketing, product, general manager, R&D can listen to the calls that sales is having, right?
Mhm.
So that they can hear from the client's mouth what they are saying. This is the problem I need to solve. Oh, we didn't know that problem was there. We didn't realize that this solution is used for this type of problem. We had it for these other three types of problems. But now we're going to add four. Oh, that fourth one might be the one that we should actually change our entire strategy, our go to market strategy, and target that. So when it comes to sales and going to the incorrect ICP, oftentimes it's because there's a misunderstanding from sales on what the real ICP is. Yes, they need to do pre-call planning when you talk about research. All of that needs to happen, right? But even before that, as they are going through training, they need to have a solid, strong foundation and understanding and clarity on the ICP for the solution. If that failure happens to me, that is a failure that yes, there's accountability from a sales perspective, but it's a greater accountability that needs to be measured on how they were instructed on what the ICP is and how it was vetted. So
You
that's
mentioned
so one more thing I will add is that so sales, for instance, if you are supplied with this is the ICP, like for us as lawyers, what type of lawyers are we talking about? Are we talking about litigators? Are we talking about transactional attorneys? Are we talking about appellate attorneys? Then we go to the next layer. What type of practice areas are we talking about? Are we talking about criminal? Are we talking about family law? Right? Let's also even go to, are we talking about solos, duos? Are we talking about 3 attorney firms? Are we talking about 1 to 10 attorney? Are we talking about 11 plus? Are we talking about 50 plus? Right? What are we talking about? And making sure that as we look at these products, where do they fit?
you mentioned something earlier too about that the client's perception of why we're selling, why it was important can often be different from ours. I tell this story often. I've got it recorded on video. One client I sold to probably 15 years ago, I sold court reporting to. And 2 weeks later, he took me out to lunch and he asked me this question. He said, "Do you know why I chose to do business with you instead of your competitor?" And I was like, "Yeah, because the technology is great. I showed you how it will save you time, yada, yada." I'd been a paralegal, so I came from it from a different point of view, but I'd been the end user. But still, that was my programmed response, right? And he said, well, that's all nice. Yes, that's a point. But the main reason that I chose to do business with you instead of your competitor is because when you walked into my office, you knew more about me than I knew about myself. And that
Mhm.
goes back to what we're talking about doing the research. And that's one of the things that sales reps do wrong with the research. The other thing you're saying, and we're saying the same thing, is the ICPs need to be developed and the stories, messaging built around the ICPs, all stakeholders within the product or service team need to be together: the marketing, the product, the sales, the client success. So all four of those departments need to be involved in defining the ICPs and telling the stories around them, because the product needs to fit what the ICP's pain points are. It needs to be the solution. Everybody needs to be on the same page. That's another thing that I actually see. I don't think some companies are always doing right. They're not bringing those teams internally together, because ICP, I know we're hammering home on it because that's what the topic is, but it's so foundational to success. It's for success and growth for the vendor selling the product or service, and success for the client buying it. So internally, the first thing that needs to happen is that marketing, sales, product, and client success do actually need to be aligned. All four departments, they need to come together and they need to define the ICP and all the messaging around it for each one of where each one of them are driving. They need to come together. And it helps everybody grow.
I think the best person to do that is that's why general managers are so
Mhm.
needed.
Right.
Seriously, they are needed. But let me ask you a question, because I'm
Sure.
curious. How different is ICP from your lens to from personas?
The so We've started doing real client personas at RPC Strategies.
Mhm.
We've gone from ideal clients. So we have our own surveys that we've built out, that we've iterated over time, and we've taken best practices from, industry standards, and then what we've learned, we've incorporated. So we now have our own survey. But one of the things that we started doing last year was, and a lot of marketing agencies will develop ideal. It's a fictional, and
Mhm.
I've seen clients use AI to help create that. But if they don't know to ask all the questions, they're missing critical components by doing that. Um, so we've developed our own survey at this point. But about a year ago, we actually started, instead of developing an ideal, we asked the client, what are the three titles that you're selling to and why?
Mhm.
And then I would go to my, especially in legal tech, I would go to my network, because I've been in law for 31 years. So I've built a pretty substantial network at this point. I go to my own network and I go to two colleagues in my network who have that title, and I ask them to sit with me for a half an hour to go through those surveys. So I'll do that for all three. So I have six people total that end up sitting with me. I go through that, and then I create a composite. So I'm interviewing real people, but then I'll create a composite for that ideal. And then that's what we present to our clients. And then that's what informs strategy, content strategy, thought leadership,
Mhm.
the sales messaging. It's going to help to inform competitive intelligence. So that's how we've differentiated between ideal, and we've moved it a step further into, we're actually interviewing real people. And CJ, I'm so glad we did it every single time. Just like what you said, the story I just gave, and doing this personas every single time, CJ, they are telling us things that the vendor is not thinking about, because a lot of the vendors haven't practiced law. They haven't built law firms.
Sure.
And it's
Hmm.
that's been
Yeah, I
really.
look at it as the ICP for me is essentially a detailed description of type of company or buyer that has the best possible fit for the product or service.
Mhm,
And it's the customer who gets the most value for what is being offered. And I see like the other elements of what we're talking about as like the gatekeeper, the initiator, the decider, things of those natures. Those I see those as players or personas. They are part of that ecosystem, but the ICP itself is very clear in detail. We are going after family law attorneys, as an example,
mhm,
not criminal, right? We will do family law, we would do estate planning, because we see that there is a correlation that if people do family law, they will do estate planning. We are not doing criminal. We are not doing business lit, right? And so being that specific, is how I see when we are creating an ICP, built around everything from, like I said, the firmographics, the pain points, the needs, the budget, right? The decision makers and the behaviors and triggers, so that we can have targeting at such a high level that we're able to make sure we're pointed at the right prospects. And we do that in multiple ways, but right. And so that means that, marketing is there, right? Because if marketing creates a certain demand gen, right? Where we're, bringing, leads to us, right? Then we are able to look at the attribution. We're able to look at the click rates. We're able to look at, who's actually seeing this content and interacting and engaging with it and at what level, right?
Mhm.
As it gets to sales, sales is more so about identifying, do we have the right ICP? Is this the right type of client for the solution and the business? Because all clients are not right. When I think about how people sell outside of legal tech, how people sell and market watches, right? High-end watches. You
Mhm.
can walk into a Rolex store and the story goes, they don't care how much money you have, you will not leave with a Rolex. They need to vet you. They want to make sure that you are right for the brand. That says something, right? Because they know who their ICP is. They know exactly all the way down who their ICP is. And there's a lot of different luxury watches and luxury watch houses that operate in that fashion. You may have the money. You could be a millionaire. That's great. But if I'm the AD there, and it's my job to make sure that I protect the brand of this particular timepiece, I need to know you. I need to vet you. I need to see if you're the right person, that if I allow you to have access and purchase this timepiece, do you understand the engineering? Do you understand what went into making this watch? Will you be able to speak highly of the brand, or is this just a purchase and you're not really committed to the brand? Very
What
interesting,
do you
right?
think for the purchase? Is it vanity or is it
Right. Because if it's vanity, they're like, we don't want to sell it to you.
right? Right, right, right,
Right.
right.
We want to make sure we have the right people. And that's the message to sales, is that, if you're selling to the wrong ICP because that person wants to buy, as the saying goes, all money is not good money, right? Because it will ultimately lead to a potential clawback or
Mhm.
chargeback, depending on if your company has that. Churn, you're going to lose that customer. That customer will go out in the market and say, this service was terrible. The solution was terrible. I thought I was getting this and I got that. If you're hone in on the right ICP, the likelihood of that happening is very unlikely, because you have a buyer who understands the value of your solution. They enjoy using your solution because of what it does for them. And they're likely to go out in the market and speak very highly about the solution, with one caveat: as long as your customer success, your client management team is on point and they're servicing the client properly. I will say that does matter.
So we're talking about really two levels of ICP, and I completely agree with you, because as you were talking, I was thinking of how we've defined our own ICPs as well. Like, and you're right. Like, we have three ICPs at RPC Strategies. We have startups, scale ups, and exit planners, and then I've been very specific about how old they are, where their ARR is, whether they're making money organically, whether they're VC funded, what have you. So there's those parameters, but then within each one of those, who is our decision maker? And I'm always going to, if it's a startup, definitely the founder and the CEO. If it's a scale up, probably, it's always going to be the C-suite, chief revenue, chief marketing, still see the CEO for scale ups. So we're talking about two levels of ICP. Same thing for legal tech selling to law firms. What size law firm are you selling to? Because you and I both are talking about the SMB
Yes.
segment.
Yes.
A lot of tech vendors go straight for the AM laws, and at the company cases, corporate legal departments. Some are successful with that, but everybody seems to be chasing that when, even I don't even remember how many years ago it was. It had to be at least 10 years ago, maybe longer than that. I was at Legal Week, and there was a panel of federal judges, and Judge Shinlin, Judge Ira Shinlin. Um, it was like 5 or 6 of them that had been making big e-discovery decisions and big e-discovery cases, and it kind of framed e-discovery. So it's been a while. But she made the comment, 80% of the law firm market in the United States is the SMBs. And for 2 decades, we've been, tech is selling to the AmLaws, corporate legal, bet the company cases. Well, they kind of tapped out, and now they're advancing their technology. AI is amazing. It's a wonderful tool. In the last 3 years, we've really kind of harnessed the purpose of it. We've kind of reined it in, but there's still challenges with that, and challenges with adoption, challenges with integration. Great, your technology has evolved, but who are you selling to? What size law firm is really going to benefit from this? Who has the money to buy it? And honestly, with the way technology has evolved, and we might as well talk about it because that's all anybody's talking about in legal tech is AI right now, it's leveling the playing field for the SMBs. So all these conversations we've been having for a couple of decades about the small to mid-sized market, now's the time to really capitalize on that. It represents 80% of our industry, and the technology with the AI and the way it's evolved, and the way vendors are maintaining the cost, but the way it levels the playing field and makes the SMBs more competitive and efficient, and laws are changing, ethics are changing about using technology tools with AI. Now's the time to really capitalize on the SMB market with your legal tech tools, for sure. But understand the ICP at the level of the firm, the practice areas that you're selling to, and then within that, who is the decision maker? Who is the person you really need to be talking to?
And understanding what matters for that decision maker,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then also just the point that you talked about with AI, it's interesting. Being in legal tech for over 25 plus years, leading various divisions. I currently lead a large sales division right now. But when I think about AI and where we are at right now, outside of it being very exciting, I think about the days of 10, 12 years ago when the formation of AI, right? Like it was like all the components were there, but we were not ready for AI
Mm-hmm.
at that time, or even to call it AI. We were talking about machine learning, cognitive computing. And let me tell you, it was the fastest click that you would ever see on a PowerPoint during a presentation. And no one stopped to ask, what did you just say? Not even the attorneys. I've never seen a finger move so fast in my life. Yes, sir. We have cognitive computing and machine learning. Click, click. I wish I could have timed it for a Guinness Book of World Record. Like, who has the fastest click? I guarantee you it was a sales professional that was talking at that time about machine learning and cognitive computing that was on a PowerPoint presentation that they were delivering in their sales presentation, because we knew, number one, it wasn't explained properly to us in a
We didn't
simple
understand.
way.
Nobody understood it.
No one
Nobody.
understood it. And the lawyers didn't want to say, I don't understand. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? They didn't want to say it either, right? So it was the fastest click. We knew it was important, but we didn't know what it was. But now that I see where we are, where the world is ready for it,
Mm-hmm.
and the world is embracing it, and that is true. That's all you're hearing. AI this, AI that. We have AI. It helps you, reduce time here, right? I guarantee you that with the big companies out there, and I would push for the ones that you're talking about, like that RPC works with, that they take the time and do what the bigs are doing, which is they're going back to those customers. They're asking questions. They do have a team stood up for that, right? And sometimes it is the leader of that division, or it is the marketing team. But they're not just doing surveys, they're making phone calls, they're hosting dinners, they are in the weeds because they want to get it right, right? And they know they will iterate along the way, but they want to make sure that they're not far off from where their strategy should be. And that's very important. So I would push and highly recommend for the SMBs that are in legal tech, that are coming into legal tech and startups, that have constant communication with your customers, have a win-loss process, have a very, very strong look back process. When you look at your, marketing funnel, what happened to those leads and those conversions? What were the conversions that what are the conversions that we had that were fast? Why were they fast? Why did they convert? Right? Especially the ones that converted to opportunity from opportunity to client, right? To customer. And then they renewed or they're going to renew. Why? And the ones that didn't make it through, again, why? Validate, ask the questions, get with them, show them that this is not a sales call in this situation. I am calling to understand so that we can get better as an organization. And we really, truly appreciate you helping us. I just have a few questions to ask you. My first question is, why didn't you buy? Let them talk and understand it, collect the data, look back at the data and see if there are things that you're missing. See if it's a situation where your sales pitch was wrong or your marketing message, your value prop, they're not feeling it, right? Small little pivots are so impactful when it comes to ICP. And then I would also highly recommend that embrace technology with solutions that capture the conversation with sales, specifically if it's virtual. To have those Coach 360 solutions and or Gong type solutions where you have the call recorded, where you can break it down and you can see how the solution is being pitched, what questions or objections are surfacing from the client, how is sales handling those objections and those questions, and how fast does the deal move after those calls? Meaning, is the call and sense of urgency placed correctly? You'll learn so much. Marketing should be listening to those calls. Product should be listening to those calls, as well as the general managers and also the other C-suite, so that they have as close understanding to what is really happening, quote unquote, on the street with their solution that's being pitched to the market.
This is another good use of AI. We developed our own LLM prompt, or I did, because I'm the one that does sales for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed a 9-point prompt to help me do an analysis of all my sales meetings, because I record all of them through Fireflies.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a running Word document where I've got all the sales meetings I've had from this year, whether it's been one or I've had multiple with the same company, other stakeholders, and I can run that prompt and I can see, where, what services were they really interested, what objections, what were the buying signals, things like that. And then from that, and I've been in sales for, 21 years. I've been in law for 31. I've been in legal tech, marketing, and sales for 21. But even from that list, I was able to get AI to help create a list of questions, a how and what questions to ask based on that. So, and I've even told prospects in a meeting, hey, I've got this list of questions here. You might see me look at another screen, but I just want to make sure I cover everything. And they're like, that's great, fine. Like, they're fine with that, using a cheat sheet to make sure you're asking the right question. They're there and they're spending their time and they're looking for a solution too. So they're fine with you using tools like that. And back to the AI conversation we had last week, I reposted an article that Ari Kaplan put out where he did an interview of a bunch of legal tech CEOs.
Love Ari. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he posted this about where they mid-year, what did the beginning of 25 look like and what do they feel like the outlook is? And this is so important. And like reading other sources, right? Not just talking to internally marketing and sales, figuring out what's going on, but reading other sources by industry leaders like Ari Kaplan. And I wanted to pull up this post because there's a couple things I want to mention. And this is so important for legal tech AI to understand where the market is going now, because we are 3 years into this new phase of AI. What we've seen so far in 2025, I'm just going to read it. AI potential is clear, but outdated systems and unprepared data are slowing progress. Demand is shifting to managed AI services that can flex and adapt without massive upfront investment. Board level pressure for AI adoption is real, pushing legal teams to find efficiencies, but client engagement is harder than ever in a noisy market. What's coming in the second half of 2025? A crowded AI marketplace will spark confusion and likely lead to vendor consolidation, and not all players will survive. Geopolitical and economic uncertainty could slow deal cycles, so differentiation and speed to market will be critical. Successful AI adoption will happen in steps, not giant leaps, with legacy tech consolidation paving the way for bigger wins. We're still early in the AI marathon, but the leaders are starting to separate from the pack. That was from that article that Ari Kalpin, and I'll put it in the show notes and YouTube description for this episode.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, please do. Let's talk about it.
I love Ari. He's great, and I agree with everything that he says. One thing I would add, specifically with with the crowded market will always be crowded. The rubber meets the road with the value prop and the education that the sales professional has. If the sales professional is pitching product, your company won't survive. If the sales professional understands the why and the ICP, your company will survive. But not by pushing product. And it has to be, this is who I am. This is what we deliver to you that will help you do this. That's what will be the differentiator in the market, and it will cut through like a hot knife on butter. What's happening is that as these solutions and these companies are being stood up very quickly utilizing AI, no one is taking the time that is needed to truly train sales to be efficient in their delivery of their pitch, their understanding of the probes that should happen next, to truly align to a problem or a need that the solution can help remedy, and what it looks like visually in the mind of the buyer when they have access to that solution. That's a key. That's where the narrative come in, going back to what we talked about in the beginning, where this one particular sales professional uses narratives, uses storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
He does that purposely because he wants that buyer, he wants that ICP to see it. This is what it should look like. This is the current state that we have. It's bad. It's almost like the heroes are, This is the current state. We have the villain. We have, we have to work through some challenges. But when we get to the other side, it's going to be so much better. Life is amazing on the other side. We are excited to get to the other side. But right now we got the current state. Now we got to go to the desired state. The people that will be able to speak and tell the story at a simple level of how AI will help them, those will be the companies that will grow, and those sellers will be the ones that will be rewarded in this market.
All right, let me give you a couple of examples. Let's give some examples and how would CJ solve these problems. Okay, so
you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
This is like an interview now. Like I wasn't ready for this, guys.
I did. I pulled this one.
How CJ is going to solve these problems.
I am pulling this one.
I will give you
out of the hat. CJ was not prepared for it.
I will say, is this paid for play?
Okay, so let's see. I've got these. Let's see. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always try just one more time. Thomas Edison.
Okay.
All right.
I know that.
All right. So, all right. First scenario, CJ. All right. Marketing is generating thousands of MQLs, but sales is unable to convert 99% of them.
Mm-hmm.
As a sales leader, where do you start to solve that problem?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to have conversations with my sales leaders and also some of my sellers. Like, what are you seeing?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening when you get these leads? What's happening on the call? I'm going to inspect that piece first. Then I will go to my marketing partner, and I'll start asking my marketing partner questions. How do we set up these MQLs? What was the campaign that we're running? What's the
What was
target?
the messaging?
What's the messaging? What's the target? What's the expectation?
Mhm.
Do we have alignment there? Um, what's the value prop? Right. And somewhere between those conversations, we'll be able to see where there's potentially some misalignment. I will also bring to that scenario a handful of calls, you know, where we succeeded, and then also with that 1%, which is not a lot, but then also where we didn't succeed. And I will ask those questions, why? What was the difference? Here's what I uncovered. These are my observations. And then I will pinpoint what I think we should do next with collaborating with marketing, right? So I would make sure that that happens.
So where does assessing the ICP fall in that part of the solution?
Yeah, I think that that falls in because when we have that communication from our sales leaders and our sellers, when I have that information, and then when I have the conversation with marketing, that's where we'll be able to determine, are we pointing at the right ICP? And then
Mhm.
also, did we train up sales properly? Is there a missing component there where sales is not properly trained on the ICP, or there's a mismatch here, right? The customer was expecting this, but we're selling that, and they're not the same. So, do we have a product fit issue as well?
So product fit and research and consultative selling are
It's
the
that,
first.
but it's also, but I want to make sure that the underlying piece of it is making sure that there is a team effort. And when you talk about research, we can't just blanket that, because that's how real business works, based on collaboration, teamwork, and relationships. It is having those conversations with sales, sales leadership, asking, what are you seeing? What's going on? Like, wow, we had X amount of thousands of MQLs, but we only converted 1%. Let's start there. Like, what happened on those calls? Let's listen to some of those calls. Let me understand that. Then it's taking that information and going to marketing, saying, hey, here's what we got. What was the mission here with this campaign? What did we think was going to happen? And then we have that conversation. That is so important. And I know we called it research, but that's more than research. That's a collaborative teamwork effort, and it's an initiative that has to continue to flow throughout the entire org.
Okay. Second scenario.
Mhm.
We've written an ebook. We promoted it organically. We didn't put any paid campaign behind it. And in 1 month, it generated 75 targeted leads, but we didn't get any buying out of it. We generated an ebook to sell one service. We got 75 leads, but they were leads for we need to develop another service. How would you solve that problem?
I
It
think
was
we need to
MQL.
talk to those. Yeah, we need to talk to those. I think we need to talk to those clients. If they're saying that you need to set up a new solution, new service, what did they see from that particular ebook that caught their attention that we didn't see?
Why did they download it? Because they downloaded
Right.
it for a reason different than what we were promoting.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, we need to talk to them, but also we still need to talk to sales, because, if sales had some of those calls, sales will be able to tell you that,
Mhm.
no, I had to pivot on that call. I had to pivot on that call and sell a different solution. Right. The one thing you don't want is, you don't want to be out of alignment with sale. You don't want any misalignment there. Right. Because if there's misalignment, then marketing is functioning on an island, and there's no connection, there's no bridge there. The marketing is just shooting out messages, and it's not the correct ICP. The ICP is not aligned. Then the conversions are there, and then you can get into like a pissing match between sales and marketing. You don't want that, which goes back to what I was saying, having that collaborative partnership,
Mhm.
sales and marketing, hand in hand with each other. As a campaign is created, they're working with the senior sales leaders to say, this is the campaign that we're creating. We're going to vet that out with also some of the top sellers, right? We're going to get their perspective on it. Do you think this will land? Do you think this messaging is on point? Right? That is so important. And if that's not happening, if there's no GM in the process there too, making sure that GM is on board. And I'm not saying you have to do it with everybody, but I think it's wise to slow down in the marketing process in addition to slowing down within the training and sales process to say, are we in alignment here with the overall strategy? Does this make sense? We think we have something. We have a hypothesis. Let's make sure we vet this out correctly. Let me talk to a few people who have had a lot of success in our market. Let me talk to some of the clients. Let me talk to some of the customers, right? And that will give you so much information so that everyone is in lock and step as that campaign is about to launch. Versus if we're operating on an island and we're sending out an ebook, we haven't vetted it with any of our clients or the messaging with our clients. So we don't have like any type of a client group that we talk to once a month, that we just have an ongoing relationship. We haven't talked to sales leaders to see does this make sense because they truly know because they're so close to the customers. We haven't talked to any of our veteran leaders, our tenured reps, to say, hey, does this make sense to you? Is this something that you are seeing on your calls or have heard on your calls, right? And also, that gets you buy-in as well, right? Because you're bringing people along, right? If that doesn't happen, you end up in that solution where you have those ebooks that are out there and customers are like, hey, I downloaded this ebook, but I really want this, right?
So in the first scenario I gave you, we're generating thousands of MQLs, but very little conversion on the SQL. So the ICP at that point, maybe we're targeting the wrong ICP and we
Could be.
need to get back together. In the second scenario, we ran an ebook, we generated 75 targeted MQLs, and they want to convert. You can get meetings, you can have conversations, but they're not buying the product.
Right.
So that's a product issue. You had, in the first scenario, you had the wrong ICP, maybe. In the second scenario, you have the right ICP, but the wrong product, right? Okay, so here's the third scenario.
So I think, but it goes back, like I said, I'm gonna keep beating that drum. I will beat that drum.
Aligning marketing, sales,
Aligning marketing and sales,
well,
and we cannot skip that.
that is
That
the
is the
biggest
heartbeat. That's the heartbeat.
That's the biggest component that's missing is aligning marketing, product, sales, and client success. So they're all coming together for the same the ICP, the pain points, the story, and the solution. You
Right.
have to bring them all in the same room. That's the biggest problem. I completely agree with you.
Mhm.
Okay. Third and final scenario. You ready?
Mhm.
You've got a head of sales, and you've got a marketing team. And over the course of 2 years, you've done all the operations, you've done the ICPs, you've built the messaging, you've executed. No one's generating any leads. What's the problem? How do you solve it?
It's not an easy solve. I think it goes back to what's changed. What's changed? Do we have different sellers in seat? That could be a problem, right? Their ability to understand the solutions and their maturity within the market, is that a symptom, right? Do we have new marketers who are trying to do marketing in a different way than what has been done in the past? Not saying that's wrong. Not saying that's wrong. But going back to it, do we have those partnerships and relationships there? Have we checked those boxes? Has our cheese moved, right? We talked about AI.
Mm-hmm.
So has the market changed? You and I go back to the days of law on disc, right? And trying to get attorneys to go onto the World Wide Web. Yes, at one point, that had to happen. That push was being made to move from law on disc to, hey, I have this awesome way to get your cases in code. It's
Let me
on the World Wide Web.
I'm going to hijack you there, and I'm going to make sure everybody knows, yes, CJ and I actually have been in it for that long, which is more than a couple of decades. But look how great we look. We just have a day.
I appreciate that. Thank
Another
you.
reason to have a career in legal tech and
There
law.
you go. That's right. That's right. It's the fountain of youth when you join legal tech. They don't tell you that until you take the pill. You're right.
Real
But
fountain of youth.
that's right. It's the ongoing fountain of youth. But it's real. It's that the market changed, right? The market went from, law on desk portfolio, right? To remember when we had large libraries with millions of dollars in print and it was taking
Yes.
up
Yes,
space.
CJ,
Right?
I'm old enough to remember that.
So
Yes.
remember those days, and then we moved to everything being online. Then we went from not even talking about how search has changed from dot commands to Boolean to freestyle to now we're with AI, right? So we need to pause in that scenario to see and observe what's changed as we are assessing a way to solve it. All these solutions begin and end, in my eyes, with first looking at it, taking a step back, looking at it from a bigger lens to say, what's different, what's changed, and where do we see potential areas that we can learn from that we were not aware of? Who can I talk to? What alignment do I need to have internally for this to be successful in the future? What insight can I gain from talking to my marketer, talking to my product person, talking to my customer success person, talking to my sales leaders and my sellers, hearing from them, and then coming up with an understanding from all those different parts that this is what happened. This is why this potentially failed. This is what we believe the three reasons why it failed. Here are the five things that we're going to do moving forward so that we're ahead of this, so that we can be better.
So let me tie a bow on this.
Mhm.
This whole episode, we've been talking about the cost of selling to the wrong ICP. And what I'm hearing is the cost, again, if best in class close win rates are 30% or better, but the average is only 21%, we're leaving a lot on the table. And we've talked about AI, we've talked about data sources, we've talked about, training the sales team, consultative meetings, storytelling, research, all of that. There's so many components, so many pieces that need
Relationships.
to come together. But the main solution I'm hearing is that internally for a B2B SaaS or legal tech company, you do truly need to bring marketing, sales, product, and client success. You need to bring all four of them to the table in the beginning to together define the ICP. And your ICP is, what is the size firm you're going to pursue? Are there certain practice areas that your product or service is a better fit for? And within that, who are your target individuals, your target stakeholders? So there's actually three levels of ICPs. So the solution is bring your whole team together internally first with your GM, chief growth officer overseeing it, and then target your ICPs on three different levels. And make sure that your messaging and your training is consistent across all verticals. And that's what's going to help you increase to better close win rates. And that's what's going to help you get your ICP correct.
Yeah. And isn't it something that everything goes back to that Covey book, The Speed of Trust, at the end of the day, right? Building relationships and having the speed of trust. When I think about some of the things I had to do in the past in different roles, when we launched, at one point, it was me and another GM. I had the upper end of the market and she had the lower end of the market. We were tasked with bringing several products to the market
Mhm.
within 12 months. So we had to design the actual go to market strategy for each of those solutions. It always began having a conversation with product, followed by marketing and sales and client success, making sure that we were all on the same page. And yes, we did do research, but the number one, before we got to that R, the first R was the relationship. Then we did the research. And as we created our deck and our plans and our strategy, what was the unique value prop
Mhm.
for that solution? Who was the target? Being really clear on that. What did the addressable market look like? What were our goals? Who else is doing this in the market? can they compete, or can we compete with them, right? If that was the situation, right? We would have that all wrapped up together before we would launch that solution or that campaign out, and have a call with our executive team presenting to them our business case, and it was very sophisticated. And when we did it, it worked, and it made sure that the entire business was in alignment. But then we didn't stop there, because we would go back and we would talk to the market, aka the clients, right? And make sure that we did our proper analysis after the launch too, so that we could have a complete understanding of why it worked or why it didn't land as well as we thought. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've got just a couple minutes. We're going to wrap up. Any final words or thoughts that you want to leave our audience with before we close out?
I would say for our sellers, sales is a noble profession. I get that from a great mentor of mine named Keith Hawk. It's a very noble profession. In order to maintain the nobility of our profession of being sales professionals, do yourself a huge favor, and I highly recommend stay reading. Not only about, sales, which I really push upon you to read sales books, sales literature, work with technology, embrace it. Also read about your market. Continue to be curious. Continue to be curious about your clients and why they're buying from you and what need you're truly solving. How do you enrich their work life? I think if you could do that, you will see that your success will grow, because the main thing is you can only be successful if your client is successful. So their success comes before yours. And that's what I would leave people with.
Perfect. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. CJ, I loved having you on the show, and I love our friendship. So thank you very much for being here. You can get in touch with me at rogo@rpcgrowthstrategies.com or 205-873-1234. Happy to sit down and chat about your growth marketing strategies. And we look forward to seeing you on your next episode. Thanks so much.